Greetings, fellow Watford fans. Omar here with a Orns observation after what we saw on Friday night at Wolves. Wolves 2, Leeds 3. Yeah, that was a gut punch of a result, wasn't it? Leeds were dead and buried at halftime in that game. A really wild and crazy game where it looked as if Leeds were going to go on and get smashed, but it was not to be. A pivotal moment in that game, of course, came early in the second half. Raul Jimenez sent off for Wolves, and wow, did that ever change the balance of that game? Leeds had the ascendancy, a man advantage, and that was that. And they came from behind in a sensational style. That is a big result for Leeds. There's no question. For Watford fans, all of us, we definitely felt the kick in the stomach there, or as Dean Martin would say, "Ain't that a kick in the head?" I mean, we felt it, and that was a very rough result for us on Friday night. But all is not lost. That's right, all is not lost. Watford still have their fate in their own hands. And I am now going to include Brentford, even though they have 30 points in the mix here for a possible trip to the championship. Look, I have put up here a list of the teams that Watford are going to be chasing for a spot in the Premier League. Now, look, you may or may not be able to see those, but there they are. There they are. That is a chart that I have just drawn out on my legal pad. And here I have the games left. Now, for Brentford, they are on 30 points. Their goal difference is minus 13. They have 9 games left. And they currently sit, to the best of my memory, in 15th spot. 15th place, 30 points, 9 games to play. This is Brentford's schedule: at Leicester, at Chelsea, home against West Ham, at Watford, home against Tottenham, at Manchester United, home against Southampton, at Everton, and home against Leeds. That's Brentford's last game of the Premier League season. Leeds then on 16th place, in 16th on 29 points. Their goal difference is minus 33. And Leeds have 8 games remaining now. Their next games, these are all in order. Next game for Leeds is home against Southampton, at Watford, home against Chelsea, at Palace, home against Manchester City, at Arsenal, home against Brighton, and away at Brentford. That is the final match of the season for Leeds. So those are 8 games left. The silver lining for Watford is Leeds only have 8 games to play. Their goal difference is inferior to Watford's. And despite the fact that Leeds are on 29 points, that's 7 points clear of Watford, Leeds still have to come to Vicarage Road. Now, I know, I can hear you now, fellow Watford fans. You are saying, goodness gracious me, our home form stinks. And you'd be right about that. Yes, our home form does stink, but I believe we can turn this around. A better home performance against Arsenal, of course. Look, Arsenal are always going to be tough for many teams in the Premier League, but that was a better performance by Watford overall, despite the mistakes they made. And they were competitive with Arsenal right down to the end as they lost 3-2. Now, Watford have begun to get the balance right in the game against Southampton, and I think that can put them in good stead for anything that comes next. Of course, Liverpool's going to be a very difficult game, but you never, ever know in this league. After we watched what we watched on Friday night between Wolves and Leeds, anything can happen in these games. Even at the top teams, anything can happen. And with Liverpool busy in a number of competitions, by the way, Trent Alexander-Arnold, who is one of the best left backs in the world, one of the best right backs in the world, he has now been injured. So he got injured. And he's going to be out of the England squad. So he will not be playing in these games, even though he was picked. And who knows? You never know with these games. You never, ever know. But I've just read out to you the Brentford remaining fixtures and the Leeds remaining fixtures. I mentioned that the second game that Leeds play after they've gone home against Southampton, they have to come to Vicarage Road against Watford. Now, Everton, that's the next team I'm looking at. Everton in 17th place on 25 points. They got that massive win, a real heartbreaking kick in the teeth again. That was on Thursday night. when they beat Newcastle 1-0. Another strange game. Both of these games, these last 2 days, whether it was the one on Thursday at Goodison between Everton and Newcastle, or whether it was the one on Friday night between Wolves and Leeds, they were both very strange games. We had the protester come onto the field in the Everton game and actually um, attached himself to a goalpost by his neck. I mean, one of the most extraordinary of in football. So, look, there's all kinds of weird things that happen in these games, and you just don't know. You just don't know um, really what to expect in these games now. I mean, who would have thought that would have happened? Who would have thought that in the game on Friday night, Raul Jimenez would have been sent off, and with a 2-0 lead, Leeds would come back. With a 2-0 deficit, Leeds would come back and win. And nobody saw that coming after how Leeds were playing in the first half of that game. They didn't look dead and buried. So look, there's all kinds of time left. Watford still have 9 games to play. I'm going to read you Everton's final 11 fixtures. Okay. They have 11 to play. So they do have 2 extra games to play. They have 25 points. They are in 17th. Their goal difference is -18. Here are their games, the 11 games at West Ham. These are all in order. At West Ham, at Burnley, home against Manchester United. Now, all of those games are in the space of a week. They play 3 games in a week, and that's at West Ham, at Burnley, home against Manchester United. That's Everton's first 3 games. Then they're home against Leicester, at Liverpool, home against Chelsea, at Leicester. They play Leicester twice because they've not even played Leicester this season. Then after the game at Leicester, they go home against Brentford. That's going to be a really big game, Everton versus Brentford. Then at Arsenal, that's the final game they play in the season, is at the Emirates against Arsenal. That's Everton's schedule. And that does not include the 2 games, of course. They have a home game against Crystal Palace that has yet to be put on the fixture list for an exact date. And of course, they have the visit to us at the Vic, and that one is yet to be scheduled as well. So look, this is far from over. This is far from over. I know you are feeling down, Watford fans. I know you must be after that. It was a very difficult loss tonight for Wolves. We were all obviously hoping that Wolves were going to get over the line against Leeds, but when that sending off happened, that just had a very, very bad look to it for me. And you saw what happened. Leeds were very hungry for that game, and they absolutely responded to the desperation of the moment, and they took advantage of it. So look, this is the list of games that count here now. All of these games are the ones that count. All is not lost for Watford. Watford fans, I know that fellow Watford fans, I know that you're feeling absolutely gutted, and it was a rough loss. It was painful. I mean, I felt that too. It was a very painful loss tonight for Wolves and also for Watford, really, because it feels as if Watford lost that game and not Wolves, strangely enough. And we did lose ground there. So that is a massive, massive win for Leeds. But look, even at 30 points, I wouldn't count Watford out here with the fact that Brentford are on 30 and Leeds are on 29, just because of the way the schedule looks for both of those teams. It is far from over. And remember, Watford have their fate in their own hands. The thing is, despite the poor home form, Watford have all of these teams to come to Vicarage Road. That is something I will take every day of the week as far as Watford are concerned. When you've got all of these teams coming to your building, you have a unique opportunity to put these teams away. And even with the home form, I think that desperation time kicks in for Watford in these games. You've got to play all these teams. You've got these teams in your building. You would take that every day of the week. You would bite anybody's hand off for that. To have Burnley coming into your building, to have Everton coming into your building, Leeds coming into your building, Brentford coming into your building, and Leicester as well. Leicester on 33 points, and Leicester are going to be safe. And I think that despite the fact that Newcastle are on 31, just a point ahead of Brentford, I think Newcastle are going to be as safe as well. I'm just looking at the teams I've mentioned. Brentford on 30, Leeds on 29, and Everton on 25. Those 3 teams are going to be the 3 teams that Watford will have to contend with to make sure that Watford stay in the Premier League. Watford are going to have to beat each and every one of those three teams. And obviously, they're going to have to beat Burnley as well. Now, Burnley have 11 games left to play. Burnley have a slightly easier schedule. I think of all the teams in this relegation mire, Burnley's schedule is, I think, probably the most favorable, it would be fair to say. And then Watford's would be the second most favorable. For Burnley, if you look at Burnley's fixtures, here's what Burnley have to do here. Now, they have 11 games as well, and that is a plus as well. So, like Everton, they have 11 games left to play. And when you look at the Burnley schedule here, and it is admittedly one that I think favors them, if we're just really being honest about it, this is what Burnley have to do. Okay. Now, they have a game yet to play against Aston Villa. So that game is to be scheduled. They would be visiting Aston Villa. And then here are the rest of their games in order. Their first three games they have to play in the space of 8 days, really 9 days. They have 3 games in 9 days. April 2nd, home against Manchester City. That's Burnley, home against City. 4 days later, they are home against Everton. That's a massive game. Burnley versus Everton, April 6th. Massive. That's at Turf Moor as well. Then they visit Norwich on the 10th of April. That's the 3 games in 9 days. Then they go and visit West Ham. Then 4 days after the West Ham game, they are home against Southampton. Southampton figure in a number of these games, don't they? Then again, 3 days later after that, they are home against Wolves. Burnley have a lot of home games. 6 of their 11 are at home. Then they visit Watford on April 30th. Then Burnley visit home against Aston Villa. So Burnley play Villa twice, which is interesting. They've not played the way that Everton and Leicester have not played yet this season against each other. Burnley and Aston Villa have not played yet against each other this season. So on May the 7th, they are home against Villa. And then the away leg where they play Villa away from home is still yet to be scheduled, as I said earlier. Then after the game at home against Villa on May 7th, they go May 15, a visit to Spurs, and then they go home to take on Newcastle for the final game of the season. So, Burnley's schedule is relatively easy, but they still do have to play away at West Ham. They have to host Manchester City. That won't be easy. Of course, they've got a massive home game against Everton, which I think is going to be a very, very important result that will figure one way or another. Then they've got a visit to Norwich, which should be fairly easy for them. Home against Wolves. Wolves are going to be fighting for a top 6 or 7 place after a really bad loss on Friday night. And then they've got to visit Spurs still before hosting Newcastle. So these games are still up for grabs. Yes, it was a gut blow. It was a real stomach punch on Friday night, obviously, with Wolves losing the game. That was a really horrible loss. And of course, it makes things more challenging for Watford. But the thing is, Watford have not played their game. Watford still have a game in hand on Wolves. Watford still have to host Wolves. Let me say that again. Watford still have a game in hand on Leeds. Watford still have to host Leeds. So that is an added advantage for Watford, but Watford have got to win the games. Watford have to win the games, as simple as. Watford have to win 5 home games. I think they've got to win all 5 of these games. And if they don't win all 5 of these games, they still, I think, have to win the game at Crystal Palace on May the 7th. That gives you a total of 15 points. 15 plus the 22 that Watford have already brings you to 37. I think 37 is going to be the magic number, the number that keeps you safe. 37 points, and goal difference will figure into this. The problem for Watford, they're on minus 26, although Leeds are on minus 33. Everybody else has a more favorable goal difference than Watford do, except for Norwich. And in fact, at this point, Norwich are done. Norwich are on 17 points. They are a minus 45 goal difference or so. They are done. I don't think Norwich are doing anything this season anymore. I think Norwich you can count as good as down. So I think Norwich are definitely down. It's a question of one from those other 5 teams. One of those, 2 from the other 5 teams. Brentford I include in this because Watford still have to play Brentford. Brentford still have to play Everton. I mean, those are games that are going to be critical. And I am not even looking at the fact that Brentford have won their last two. I'm not looking at that. I'm not looking at the fact that Everton won their last game. I'm not looking at the fact that Leeds have won their last two. I'm looking at these games down the line. Leeds have a really rough stretch. They still host Chelsea, they host Manchester City, and they host Brighton. Now, Brighton have lost 6 in a row. I mean, could you put Brighton in that list of teams? The reason I don't put Brighton in is because Brighton have 33 points, and I think they'll get 4 more points before they have to even play Leeds. So they may even be on the beach in that game. This is not over. It's far from over. I think Watford are in the best position because they've got all of these teams yet to visit their building. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I think that Watford are going to be okay in this season. The other thing to look at, fellow Watford fans, is that Watford still will get back players like Ismail Assar, knock on wood, that he will be back for Watford healthy and ready. And of course, Nicola Nkulu. I think Nicolas Nkulu is going to also be a major factor here, a defender who I think in his very brief foray so far has been excellent for Watford. And I think he really helped Craig Cathcart because Craig Cathcart's game improved as well. And Craig Cathcart has been very good ever since. So I think Nkulu, who is a veteran defender, a Cameroon defender, who I think showed you some real grit in the games he played before that horrible injury he got. He's been out ever since November, and he's poised to come back here surely in the next 3 weeks or so. So look, obviously the Liverpool game is going to be a difficult one, but if we can get something out of that, if we can get a point out of that, or if we even are able to cause an upset and shock Liverpool, you never know. You never know. This is far from over. Watford are in the driver's seat, even though they are still on 22 points and in the bottom three. Their fate is in their hands. And that's one thing that these other teams don't have the advantage of. They don't play each other more than once. I mean, Leeds do not play anybody below them at all in the rest of the way. They don't play anybody below them. So all of Leeds' remaining games are against teams that are above them, except for Watford. Same thing with Brentford. I mean, Brentford only play and then Brentford, and actually there's three. Brentford play Leeds and Everton and Watford again. But 2 of those games are going to be away from home for Brentford. So this is far from over. I do keep Brentford in this conversation as one of the bottom 6. I now add Brentford in, even though they're at 30 points, because again, 9 games to play. They are far from out of this. Leeds are far from out of this, even though they're at 29. They're still far from out of this. And then, of course, Everton on 25, definitely far from out of it. Watford on 22. I think Burnley, listen, it's going to be 2 from those 5. 2 from Brentford, Leeds, Everton, Watford, and Burnley. And you've got to figure out which 2 of those 5 teams I've just read out to you are going to be joining Norwich in the championship. We will see who it's going to be. There is still plenty to play for here now with just over 2 months of the Premier League football season remaining. This has been the Orns Observation. I'm Omar Moore.